You may be out there wondering, what do some of the other Sixers starters think about James Harden's trade request? To this point, we've had nothing until now because Tyrese Maxey finally gave us some answers. Perfect. What is going on, everybody? RB here. Welcome into Philly Take with RB. Like always, drop a like if you enjoy the content. Be sure to subscribe, ring the bell. Don't miss any of the coverage as we lead up to NBA training camp in just a few weeks. Today, we will discuss some of the comments that Tyrese Maxey made on his podcast, Maxey on the Mic, and we finally get to hear from somebody on the Sixers other than Pat Bev about how they feel about this situation, right? It's all been in the dark. Nothing's really transpired over the last couple weeks in terms of, guys talking about this. Nobody knows how anybody in the Sixers feels other than Daryl Morey. So my question to the people out there is, how should they feel? Should they be welcoming to try to bring James Harden back, or should they just keep their mouth shut like they did with Ben Simmons until training camp and just see how it plays out? What do you think? Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments section, but let's jump right into it, man. So the biggest quote that is surfacing today, and I will admit I did not listen to the whole podcast episode, but I did read up on some of the things that were said. And here was the one that was floating around. Tyrese Maxey on James Harden's trade request. He says, quote, "It's crazy to say this, but it's not our first rodeo." They're not talking about Maxey and Harden here. They're talking about Ben Simmons. And something that goes criminally underrated when we talk about the Sixers, right, is we talk about the fact that, Joel's had another disgruntled superstar situation, and Joel this, Joel that, which is perfectly true, and it's definitely relevant. But how about some of these other young guys who have to go through this toxic situation? They have to endure what it's like to have a bad situation with teammates, this and that, and in and out, and right, and just all this drama. It's definitely not good for developing some of these other players. And a lot of people talk about Tyrese Maxey, and I will say, the people that have tried to put Maxey down are mostly, I would say, Harden fans or guys that, want to see him succeed. I talk to a lot of Sixer fans daily, even if I'm out somewhere. A lot of people are high on Maxey, but there are a lot of people that I've seen this all season trying to downplay him a bit, and nobody ever talks about the fact that not only has he come into the NBA in a weird situation during the pandemic, right? But he's got 3 years of playoff experience. He's gone through some of the trials and tribulations, and he has had to play a massive variety of roles. He had to switch multiple times during the Ben Simmons fiasco, and he's had to switch, even mid-year when it comes to James Harden, right? He started in his rookie year coming off the bench, and then he was complimenting Ben Simmons, and he was kind of told he was a starter in his second year, didn't know, on a nightly basis whether Simmons would come back. So he was kind of the starter, and then you trade for James Harden in February. Then he has to go back to being really a backdoor option and just like a third or fourth ball handler. And then this past year, he has to, once again adapt his game to just being that off-ball guard, for James Harden and Joel Embiid. And he's really never had that consistency of volume. And even with that, he has grown and developed so much in his first couple years. There are not many young guys who could be stars in the making who have gone through all of that early on. And I think it's very important. And a lot of people don't ever talk about it, but he definitely hinted on it here, and he said a lot more. So we're going to get into the article and just read some of the major quotes. Shout out to Liberty Ballers for summing up really the big points from the Maxey on the Mic podcast. But I'm glad we finally heard somebody like Maxey talk about this situation. The first thing he said about James Harden, quote, "I will say this about the situation, to each his own. James, he's a professional and he's doing something for a reason. You just have to kind of sit back and understand what he's doing as a friend. But then as a teammate and someone as part of an organization I'm with right now, you have to prepare for whether James is going to be there or not going to be there. That is the nature of it." So Maxey, once again, very professional, always goes about his business the right way and handles it. Obviously they're friends. Maxey has had a huge, increase in development based on Harden, right? He's given him a lot of pointers, and, he's just gotten to watch the day in, day out of how James Harden works. And they're definitely good friends, right? We've seen that when Harden's coaching Maxey up on the sideline. But at the end of the day, Maxey's right. The best way to go about this, and I agree, you got to separate the friendship and then the business relationship. Right now, they don't know what's going on. You got to prepare for the guy to not be there. You have to be ready to step up, especially in a Nick Nurse offense. And I think that is the Maxey mindset right now based on how he's talking. The next thing he says is, quote, "It's crazy to say this. It's not our first rodeo." That's the snippet we just saw. He says, "It's funny to say, but that's life. James is his own individual, and he's able to do whatever he pleases. I'm preparing right now to play with or without him, and I love James. If James decided he's going to come back and play for us, there is nobody in this organization that would be upset about that." So shout out to Maxey for putting, really the grand scale mindset in play here, right? He says, if James and Daryl end up working it out, and maybe the best thing for both parties is for James to come back and earn more value, nobody is going to be displeased. This, to me, is kind of an outcry for Maxey a little bit, right? He's not forcing James to come back, but he's saying, James, we have a team here that can still contend. We added a new coach, right? We're probably going to add a little bit more if you can come back, if we can work this out. So, James, look, man, if you want to come back, if you want to work this thing out, which probably is not going to happen, but if you do, right, we're here to welcome you back, open arms. A lot of people won't like that, but that is, to me, is a sign of maturity from a young guy like Tyrese Maxey, and I like what he said there. I think it's cool. The last thing, he says, people ask me, quote, if James doesn't come back, do you see the season as a wash? He says, I think with the position that the Sixers are in, we can never see a season as a wash. We have talent. We have the reigning MVP on our team. We have to go out there and expect to win. Expect to still try to complete our goal. It'll definitely be even more difficult now that one of our best players has decided, as of right now, he doesn't want to come back and play. That's how life goes. Once again, feels like a little bit of an outcry, but that's the truth. Like we've been saying, it's a weird dilemma, right? The Sixers didn't completely pull back and say, we're going to trade Embiid and get a bunch of assets and start over. But then again, now you're in this bad situation here, and it's like you can't really do anything. You're restricted to go sign players and make moves, and you still have Tobias Harris in his last year of the deal. So it's like you're half in, half out. It's very confusing. But while Joel Embiid is a member of the Sixers, I agree 100% with Tyrese Maxey. You have to compete. That is the mindset. That's why they brought Nick Nurse in. And man, I just love his mindset. I think he's very, very, ahead of his years here when it comes to Tyrese Maxey. And really, it almost feels a little bit like the Ben Simmons situation where they're just saying, we're ready to move forward. We don't know what's going to happen, but we're ready for anything. And I think that is what will ultimately bring this team together. And I think Nick Nurse will kind of preach that mindset because Nick Nurse doesn't know what's going to happen. Maxey and Embiid, nobody knows what's going to happen. But I think it's nice to finally hear, from one of the players about this. And here's what Maxey said about his role, kind of going back to what I originally said about him, being in, out, having to be a second option at times, a fourth option, adapt to these different situations. He says, if James doesn't decide he wants to come back and play, it will change my role significantly. I've been able to play on the ball, off the ball. I've been able to kind of adapt in whatever situation I've been thrown into. It's just funny. Every single year, it has been something new. Very criminally underrated when we talk about Maxey and his growth. Still very, very young and developing at a rapid pace. That's why I say this guy is going to be superstar, man. I really think Maxey has all the intangibles, and I think he's going to grow here in Philadelphia. And we will end this one off today on a quote from somebody else in the East, right? We're going to talk about Giannis for a second here because there was an interview done with Giannis this week. Shout out to Tania Ganjuli. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. NBA reporter for New York Times. And they did a sit down with Giannis Antetokounmpo. And here is one of the quotes that Ian Rappaport pulled out from this interview. Giannis on his next contract with, I guess, the Bucks. He says, quote, I would not be the best version of myself if I don't know that everybody's on the same page. Everybody's going for a championship. Everybody's going to sacrifice time away from their family like I do. And if I don't feel that, I am not signing. So, when we hear something like this, let's be honest, right? He's not really committal to the Bucks. I don't think he's ever been fully, and it's really one reason I kind of respect Giannis. I used to not like him as much, but I've learned to accept it and realize, and respect him as a competitor with how hard he goes. He's not going to settle for a situation that doesn't want to win. That is one of the true stars in this league that really, really wants it bad. And he's out there saying, I've been a part of the Bucks. I've grown. I've won a championship. But if everybody is not on the same page, my future could look completely different. And I respect that. And the reason I bring it up is, number one, that could completely shake up the East, right? If he doesn't want to, end up extending with the Bucks, who knows what could happen going forward. I feel like he will, right? Lopez and Middleton ended up coming back. But, at the end of the day, man, Giannis is a competitor. You never know what's going to happen. Obviously, the East looks a bit strong, but, at the blink of an eye in a couple years, it could look completely different. And the other reason I bring it up is because some people have mentioned to me privately, James Harden might go to the Bucks, right? How about James Harden swapping for Drew Holiday? What would that trade look like? And I'm just here to tell you, Giannis will not play with James Harden, especially with what he's been through, with what he's done in different situations. That just doesn't strike me as a type of player that Giannis would like to play with. He wants to play with purebred competitors who are willing to go to war no matter what. And I just don't see that for Giannis. So give me your thoughts down below. Do you think Giannis could ever end up leaving the Bucks? All that being said, man, we are inching closer to training camp. We'll see how it all plays out. Appreciate everybody for tuning in. As always, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. With that being said, I will catch you all on the next one. Peace.